Welcome to episode number 24 of the Introvert Biz Growth Podcast, the show where I talk to introverts who grow their business and make a difference. I'm Sarah Senecroce and thrilled that you're spending this time with me today. Today I'm talking to Mark Schaefer. Mark Schaefer is a globally recognized blogger, speaker, educator, business consultant, and author who blogs at Grow, one of the top marketing blogs of the world. He teaches graduate marketing classes at Rutgers University and has written 4 best-selling books, including Social Media Explained, The Tao of Twitter, the best-selling book on Twitter in the world, and Return on Influence, which was named one of the top business titles of the year by the American Library Association. His latest book is called The Content Code. Well, actually, I think that bio might be a little bit outdated, but because when we spoke, he actually mentioned that he was just releasing just on that day. It was actually February 14th, Valentine's Day, that he had just released his latest book, which is called Known. So we are going to talk about his book a little bit and what it takes to be known as an introvert as well. And I've known Mark for quite a while. I was actually featured on his blog once. Probably about 4 years ago, I got this message from him asking me if I wanted to repurpose one of my blog posts on his blog. It has something to do with fear. Yeah, fear of being seen as an expert or something like that. So I remember that quite fondly because I was like, whoa, I'm getting asked by Mark to blog on his blog. That was great. So I never knew actually that he was a fellow introvert. I only found out when Ian Anderson Gray, who was on the podcast earlier, recommended that I talk to Mark because he said he knows that Mark also considers himself an introvert. So very excited to share this conversation with you. And here we go. Hi, Mark. How are you today?
I couldn't be better. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for taking the time. It's an honor on Valentine's Day. I'm sure it's actually morning for you, so you're still have your whole day to prepare something for later. Thank you so much for taking the time. So I just read in the bio that you're basically a blogger, speaker, business consultant, and also an author of, is it now 5 books?
I just launched my 6th book.
6, yeah. So you just mentioned offline that today is actually the launch date for your 6th book. So it's called Known. So maybe before we go into a bit of your story, why don't you tell us what this book is about?
Well, the book is about really a journey that I went on. I made an observation about 10 years ago that the way that we used to build up our reputation in the world and our influence in the world by things like having a position on an organizational chart or having a title or a big house or a big fancy car or awards on your walls, it doesn't matter anymore. That mattered maybe when I was in a big company, but once I left and tried to establish my reputation online, none of that stuff mattered anymore. Nobody cared what my title was. Nobody knew what kind of car I drove. And what I discovered was the only thing that mattered was to be known. Am I known or am I not? And over the years, I've seen this become an increasingly important aspect of our lives and our culture. And I like coaching and helping my friends and my clients. And I kept finding that I was giving the same answer over and over again to different needs that they had. I want to write a book someday. I want to create an online course. I want to attract more customers. I want to earn a place to speak at a university someday or a job at a university. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, these days to achieve that, you really need to become known. And I just had this puzzle I needed to solve. Can anybody become known? Is there a process? Is there a plan? So I started reading, I started researching, I found everything I could about this subject, and I started talking to people who are known in their fields. And it could be construction, education, real estate, training, fashion, art, music, and all kinds of different fields. And it kind of snowballed. I ended up interviewing almost 100 different people. And what I found, Sarah, was that every person in every field, anywhere in the world, did the same 4 things to become known. And so that is what my book is about. It's a plan to help demystify getting a presence on the web today. I think a lot of people are just overwhelmed. What do I do? Where do I start? How much of this do I need to do? And so this is a plan that kind of gets people focused, and it simplifies things in a very, very practical way.
Wow, so you're just leaving us hanging there. You said the 4 main things, and now we just have to pick up your book, right?
Yeah. Step one, buy the book.
Great. Well, I'll make sure to put a link to your book. But what I want to know now is, since this is a podcast for introverts, how does this work for introverts? And because for us introverts, it's always, yes, we want to be known, but we don't necessarily want to go out there and talk too much about ourselves. Yeah. So does your book apply to introverts and extroverts? And do you think there is a different plan for both personas?
Well, I actually got the book in front of me. I was trying to find a certain place because I talk about, I describe different personality characteristics of an introvert. And I said, the person I'm describing is me.
So you did come out, because it's not like you're one of these people who just goes around and tells everybody that you're an introvert. So in the book, you actually had your big coming out.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
I mean, it's interesting. I've had this fantasy for a long time to run some kind of a test to see if there's a correlation between success on the web and personality type. And every time I've kind of suggested this, I've said, well, my hypothesis is that maybe, extroverted people might have an advantage. And every time I hint at something like that, introverts come to their defense and say, I love being on the internet because I can control my presence. I can control my dialogue in my way. Right. So I do think there's a huge opportunity for people of every personality style. And one of the things I have in the book is I don't really like Snapchat. I know a lot of people love it, but I just haven't really fallen in love with it. And I had a fellow write a blog post one time, and he talked about Snapchat. And he said the people who are most successful on Snapchat are goofy and random. And I think people who would know me, who have read my blog or have met me over the years, would never say, there's Mark Schaefer, that goofy and random guy. Yeah. So it kind of dawned on me that is probably one of the reasons why I don't like Snapchat, but I do like blogging. Yeah. Because it's more cerebral. You can take your time. You can think things through. Right. You don't have to be a stand-up comedian. And so in the book, I do talk about how different content types can align with different personality types. And I truly believe that there's a place for everyone on the web, no matter what your personality is.
Yeah, it's a very good analysis. I've made my own analysis with LinkedIn because my main business is helping people get clients on LinkedIn. And now LinkedIn is kind of seen as the most boring, most sterile platform of them all. to an introvert, that's great because I don't have to talk all
Yeah.
day long about what I did for vacation and what I ate for breakfast and all of that. It's just, I'm straight to the point and it's all about business. And so it's interesting that you make that same analysis with Snapchat. It's true. I mean, you have to be very funny and spontaneous, and most introverts are probably not. So very interesting. Yeah. All right, let's talk about you a bit and kind of like something maybe that my introverted audience can relate to. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I worked for many, many years in marketing for a big Fortune 100 company. And I had this pattern where I kind of reinvent myself every 5 to 6 years. I just kind of start swinging in some new direction. And it got to a point where my last job in the corporate world, I was a global director for e-business, and I had the job for 4 years and then 5 years. And as I was going into the sixth year, I really needed to do something else and looked at all the different opportunities and had some personal things going on where I really didn't want to move. So I decided to start my own business. And this was at a time where social media was just really starting to take off and go mainstream as a business tool. This would have been around 2008. And so I immersed myself in it because I knew to be a consultant, to be a teacher, to be able to help people and create strategies, I needed to really do this. I couldn't just talk about it. I needed to do it. So I started to blog. I was a journalism major in college, and I so kind of naturally migrated to blogging. And the blog took off. Like anything, it takes time for something like that to happen, but I was patient. And I think the thing that resonated with people is because I did have almost 3 decades of business experience. So I could look from this experience point of view at what was going on and what was emerging with social media and content marketing, and offer this very practical perspective. And that really resonated with people. The blog took off. That led to opportunities to write books, and eventually got into a speaking career. And because of my personality, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified and paralyzed. And I can remember I started taking just small little things in my community to kind of get experience, try to figure it out. And I can remember my first big speaking gig was in a big city in America, very important marketing conference, and somehow they invited me to be one of their speakers, and I was just pacing back and forth before I was starting to go on. And what I finally settled on was I realized for me to establish a brand, for me to become known, it was important for me to have an impact and be seen in front of people at conferences like this, and that this was my job. And I couldn't be afraid anymore because I was going to work. It was time to go to work. This is my job. Pick up your lunch pail, put on your coat and go to work. That's what this is today. This is what you need to do. This is your choice. So slowly, with experience, I became less anxious around public speaking. And I know that's not for everybody, and you don't have to be a public speaker to become known. But now it's something that I actually enjoy. I don't enjoy the crowds, but I do enjoy the opportunity to have a big impact in a small amount of time. And that's what speaking can help you do.
Okay. How do you manage your energy? Because as we know, for introverts, usually big crowds kind of takes our energy, right? It doesn't give us energy, it takes our energy. So how do you handle, you said you don't like the crowds, but so does that mean after a speaking engagement, you just kind of try to discreetly leave the stage and disappear? Or how do you handle the after speaking event?
Well, 2 things. something that's really helped me with my speaking is before I was a speaker, I was a teacher.
Mm.
And I would teach in front of a classroom and kind of develop this friendly conversational style. And speaking in front of, I think my first classes had maybe 7 or 8 people in them. Now I teach graduate classes that might have 30 people in them. But, whenever you're starting out, when you think about it, teaching to a class like that is like learning how to be a public speaker in front of 7 people instead of 700 people.
Right.
And I kind of developed this friendly conversational style. And this amazing thing came over me. Last year, I gave the closing keynote address at Social Media Marketing World. It's one of the biggest marketing conferences in the world. There were 3,000 people in the audience.
Oh my God.
It was like an aircraft hangar filled with people.
Oh God, I wouldn't have slept a week before that.
But I was very well prepared. And when I got up on the stage, it felt like a classroom. The whole big audience just shrunk down, and I focused on 6 or 7 people in the audience, almost like they were my students. And it was really a lot of fun. I was able to kind of have that same loose, friendly, joking kind of style, even in front of 3,000 people. And it was one of the best speeches I've ever given, I think. And a lot of people really complimented me on that talk. And I think honing my skills on the small stage of a classroom really, really helped me. And then, of course, after something like that, yes, you get swarmed by a lot of people, and that's kind of, uncomfortable for me. But the way I look at this is that I never, ever take a person's time for granted. And if they read my blog or listen to my podcast or they come to see me at a talk, I will always acknowledge that. I will always appreciate that. I'm never going to run away from someone that wants to see me or meet me or say thank you. They deserve my thanks back. So that's the way I look at that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it really sounds like you kind of got that courage over time. So you went from, the small classroom to maybe 200 people, and then 500, and then 1,000, and finally, Social Media Marketing World, 3,000. Because in my last podcast, I talked about this thing that saying, you should step out of your comfort zone. And I actually said, well, introverts are usually not very comfortable outside of their comfort zone. And so another colleague of mine, Beth Bulow, kind of called it expanding on our capacity zone. And that sounds exactly what you've been doing. Because, would you agree that that's kind of an extrovert statement to kind of throw ourselves out of our comfort zone? It just doesn't feel good to an introvert.
I don't know if it feels good to anybody.
That's true.
Really.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe your comfort zone, maybe that's something that's relative. But I think as human beings, we tend to gravitate to something that's familiar. We want to achieve some sort of homeostasis in our lives, some stability. And, I think research kind of bears that out across all kinds of different personality types. I think for me, one of the things I've had to learn is I'm a very private person, and I don't like, I don't spill my guts on my blog or on my Facebook page. And I've had to experiment and push myself to reveal a little bit about myself. And every time I reveal a little bit about myself, I get rewarded for that. People say, oh, I can relate to that, or I just went through the same thing, or whatever. And I thought, whenever I reveal something about myself, it helps connect with people. And so I just, I tried a little more and try a little more. And I'm still not a person that, spills my guts about every time I have a sniffy nose or something, but But I do think it's important to have a profound and meaningful presence on the web today. We have to be original. And to be original, you have to have the courage to add your own story because you have no competition. There only is one of you. And so stepping out a little bit and putting an opinion out there or talking about a feeling or an experience or telling a personal story, those are all ways to make that connection and make your brand more powerful and meaningful.
Yeah, I think that's very important. What you're saying is that you shouldn't feel like you have to copy, the funny guy who's on Snapchat, because that probably wouldn't go over well anyways, because first of all, you're not in your comfort zone. You're probably not in you wouldn't do your best work because people would notice, oh, he's just trying to be someone else. So it's really important to find yourself and just be yourself and be that all over the web. So kind of be aligned. Yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk. I call them the introverted superpowers. So what do you think is your biggest strength as an introverted entrepreneur?
It would be introspection, I think. I think that one of the things that distinguishes me is that I can see how trends fit together. And I can see where we need to be and what's coming next. And that only comes from slowing things down and thinking and dwelling on a subject and having quiet time to learn and reflect. So I think there's a lot of people who are gaining attention today just because they're everywhere, they're nonstop, they're on every channel 24 hours a day. And that's not me. But when you hear something from me, it's going to make an impact. It's going to be something that's well thought out. When I write a blog post, I guarantee my audience it will always be something relevant, something interesting, hopefully maybe even a little entertaining. And that takes time. So I think really kind of slowing things down and being introspective and having the courage to put myself in the story a little bit, that's what helps me stand out.
Okay. Can I challenge you on the introspection? Because that could also be one of the biggest challenges as an introvert, because we tend to kind of, always go inside and maybe not where you are anymore, but definitely for a beginning entrepreneur, there can be too much introspection and keep thinking, well, should I do this or should I not? Or what,
right.
Could you see that also as a challenge?
Absolutely. And I think it's a huge challenge to become paralyzed. And one of the things that I think will give people a lot of hope that I write about in my new book is I sort of peel the curtain back on some individuals on the web who are very well known, very successful, and that we really admire. A lot of people may admire and look up to these people. And in the book, they reveal that, this was hard for me. I had to struggle with depression to keep on going. And this is how I did it. I had to struggle through feeling like an imposter. They call this imposter syndrome, where you start to get some traction and you look around and you think, why am I here? Why do I deserve to be here? Even some of the best known people that we admire, they all went through something like this. And over time, you learn. Over time, you hone your craft. You become better. You become more confident. It's going to be easier for you 6 months from now than it is today. But it won't be easier 6 months from now than it is today if you don't start. You have to start. You have to take the first step. one of my favorite stories in the book is about a woman who had an amazing career in the PR world of fashion in Paris. This is a woman who was like living in the bright lights. And she decided to give up everything and work with children in poverty and devote her life to rescuing women and children who had been enslaved by ISIS. Now, you might think, how would anybody have the courage to start something like that, to take a step like that? And she tells a story about how when she was 8 years old, she worked beside Mother Teresa in the slums of Calcutta. And she came from a wealthy family, and now she's in this slum, and there just must have been a look of shock on her face. And Mother Teresa looked at her and said, "Child, I can tell you just seem so overwhelmed right now. You see this ocean of need around you, and you don't know how to start. Maybe you feel like a little raindrop, but you can do one small kindness. You can take one step. You can create joy for one person or care for one person. Just take one step and begin, because even this ocean is not complete without your raindrop." And that's how she always kept that in her mind. And that is what gave her the courage to just take one step. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be right, but just start. And that's so important.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. I think it has a lot to do with introverts also, because what I noticed is that usually introverts have a lot more empathy. Just, comparing to extroverts, that doesn't mean that extroverts don't have empathy, but usually introverts have a lot of empathy. And sometimes that empathy can be kind of overwhelming. So that seems to be what's happening with that lady as well. We have so much empathy. We want to just, heal the whole world, but we can't. So we just have to start with that little drop. And that's important to remember, I think. Great. What about your personal challenge? So we talked about introspection might be a challenge for other introverts. What's your personal challenge today that you think that's related to your introversion?
Well, I've been around it a while now. And I'm probably my hardest critic, my harshest critic. And so I think that I am on a path of continuous improvement. I think I'm on a path of being self-aware and trying to notice my own internal reactions in certain situations. The thing that, it's a challenge for me. I'll probably never get over it. I don't know. I really hate like schmoozing and having business dinners. I would just much rather be by myself.
Okay.
And I have to push myself to what I try to do is whenever I visit a new city, I try to find someone to say hello to or someone to have dinner with or something like that, even though I would really prefer to be alone. And I haven't conquered that. I haven't not really preferred to be alone, but I am pushing myself to try to be more social, look for more reasons to connect, to engage, to celebrate.
I like that approach, because basically it's you having those dinners with one or two people or maybe a small group, but it's not that you kind of expect of yourself to go to these networking events, which would probably be a nightmare for you, right? So you are pushing yourself to be more social, but you choose how. So
I think that's a good point. The social media came at exactly the right time for me because when I was starting my business, I was going to these networking meetings and I hated it. I hated every minute of it. And I went to I'll tell you, the last meeting I went to, it was some group. It was the initials of the group were TNT. I can't remember. It was probably Tennessee Networking something with a T. TNT, like dynamite.
Yeah.
So every time people would stand up and they would say something good that happened in their business. And every time they finished, everybody would yell, boom, like TNT. God. And I didn't know this was coming.
Oh, no.
And it just scared the crap out of me because all of a sudden everybody just yells, boom. And at that moment, I thought, that's it.
I'm out of here.
I cannot get me out of here. I cannot do these cold chicken plates one more day. Yeah. I am gone. Yeah. And what I found is that social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, it's networking on steroids.
Right.
It's absolutely the best way for me to network in my way on my terms. So I probably wouldn't be successful in business without the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, like you said, you still take it offline, but it's again on your terms. You say, I'm going to be in this town, meet me for dinner. And then it's just, with a few people. So I'm totally with you. I hate those networking events. All right. Well, we're almost coming to the end of the half hour. So I always end the conversations with a mindful ending. So I want to know, well, I'm kind of guessing, but I want to know what you're grateful for this week, today, or this month.
Well, what I'm really grateful for is having the opportunity to do what I do. And that is not possible without having an audience who appreciates me, who believes in what I do. And that is just an amazing opportunity in my life, an opportunity I will never take for granted. It's an audience I will never let down. And what a wonderful world we live in. What an amazing time we live in history where someone like me can have a global audience that can, I can write a book that people love. And by the way, I self-published this book. And, today you don't have to wait to be picked by an editor or a publishing house or a newspaper. You can pick yourself. You can move forward and achieve your dreams and not wait for somebody to pick you.
Yeah, that's. I didn't know that. So that's. I think a lot of what you're telling us is create success on your own terms as an introvert, or an extrovert, or however you are, but create success on your own terms. And what I get from you and always have is also this belief that you can make a difference, whether it be with your marketing content or the story you just told us about Mother Teresa and this little girl. In the end, it's still about making a difference. And that's what my podcast is about as well. So,
great.
Thank you so much for your time, Mark. It's been a pleasure and honor. Congrats on the book launch. I'll definitely make sure to link to that. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
You can find Mark on Facebook at facebook.com/mark.schaefer3 and visit his website at businessgrow.com. That's it for this episode for the Introvert Biz Growth Podcast. You'll find this episode's show notes at sarahsenecroce.com/episode 24. I highly recommend you go check out the episode show notes every now and then because Tim, my editor, really does a good job. He summarizes everything, gives you a link to everything we talked about. So definitely do go and check it out. So sarahsenecroce.com/episode 24. And if you don't have it yet, you can get your free 4-step guide on how to say no to grow. You find the link in the episode show notes as well. And if you like this episode, as always, please subscribe to this show on iTunes or Stitcher and tell your introverted friends about it. And just a friendly reminder that you can make a tiny contribution to help me cover the costs for this show, to pay Tim for his great editing skills, which are around $70 to $100 per episode, by going over to sarahsanacroce.com/Patreon and making a monthly pledge. It can be as small as 50 cents per episode. That would just really make my day and show me that there's interest for me to keep going and producing these interviews for you. So thanks so much in advance for your contribution. And I'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. I know it seems long, but time flies and pre-excitement is half the experience. Talk to you soon.